It'll be a while before you get on one of those. All right, we're going to start. And the first person we want to introduce you to is Crispus Attucks. Now, it might be a name that you haven't heard before, because it doesn't get taught in history very often. Now, the Buffalo Soldier history didn't actually start until 1866, and that was in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. But the fight for freedom for this country and for African American soldiers actually began long before that, on March 5th, 1770. That was the date of what's known as the Boston Massacre. And the first person killed in the Boston Massacre was a black man, Crispus Attucks. So please welcome Crispus Attucks. Give him a nice round of applause. We're going to find out who Crispus Attucks is and what brought him to that moment in Boston that night. Why was he in that position? So we'll start with a little bit of background about Crispus. Crispus, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, before we get into the Boston Massacre. Where did you come from? Who are your parents? Things like that.
Okay, I was born in the year of our Lord, 1723. I was born to a slave. Everyone of black were slaves at that time. So my father was a slave, therefore I was raised as a slave. My mother was a Nattek Indian, Native American, or native to this country. They didn't keep records back then, so historians inform me that my father's name may have been Prince Younger.
So they didn't keep records, so you're not really sure the year you were born or the year you escaped, because we know later on that you did. History books tell us that at the time of the Revolution, though, that you were still considered a slave. Is that correct?
That is correct. But at around about the age of 26 or 27, I ran away from my master. I wanted to work on the docks. I wanted to be a sailor. So I joined up at the docks and sailed the coast after I changed my name. And I changed my name to Michael Johnson so that I would not be found by my master.
All right, so you did a pretty good job of hiding, but understand also that during that time, your master actually was looking for you. He took an ad out in the paper or something at one point, didn't he?
Yes, he did. But we were sailing up and down the coast to North Carolina and to Jamaica, and I was never found at that time.
That must have been pretty freeing for you to have that kind of life after being a slave for the first 27 years, to be able to be on a ship and go wherever you wanted to.
Oh, the freedom was great. It made me feel like a man.
So that gets you in Boston. You're in between ships. You're in Boston on March 5th, 1770. What were you doing that night? What put you there?
Well, we had just come up the coast from North Carolina, delivering goods between North Carolina and Jamaica. And we were taking some time off and relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Just before we had a few more days before we were about to take another trip down around the Colony coast.
All right. Now there was a lot going on at that point between the people who lived in the colonies, weren't yet called Americans, they were colonists, and the British who were still in charge. What was happening that put you in conflict with the British soldiers that night?
Well, Britain sent troops to Boston in order because the colonists were upset about some of the laws that the king had put forth, and they wanted a little more freedom to do what they come to this nation to do.
All right, so much like today, they were putting taxes on us and other laws that we didn't like, and people were taken to the streets.
Absolutely. I remember one night, as a group of us gathered at the docks where the soldiers were, one or two of us began to throw snowballs at the soldiers. Okay. It was fun at first, but then other things got thrown at the soldiers, and they were being hit. We had no weapons, but the soldiers picked up their guns and began to shoot. 6 of us were wounded severely, and 5 of us were killed.
And Crispus, you were one of the ones that was killed. It's my understanding you were hit 6 times by ricochet bullets and by other bullets fired by the British. Is that right?
That is correct.
What's the aftermath of that? We know that you died that night, as well as the 5 of your compatriots, your friends who were out there that night too, probably longshoremen, shipmates. What happened after that?
What happened after that, we were all buried together at a site called Grenady, and the people were so amazed about our fight against the British, they raised a memorial on our site.
And one of the things, and Crispus won't tell you this, but one of the things that's really unusual about his story is back in that day, African Americans were not buried in the same place as white people. They had separate cemeteries, and for him to be buried actually in the same spot, not just in the same cemetery, but in the same spot with the white friends of his who were also shot that night is really astounding. It's historic, and as Crispus said, there's a memorial that if you go to Boston in Granary Cemetery, you can still see. But that's not where your story ends. You've been honored a number of times, right?
Oh yes. At the trial, it was tried by John Adams. Mm-hmm. And the soldiers got off with only a branding on their thumbs, which they escaped being hanged at that time.
They could have been hung for killing people, but instead you say they just got like a tattoo or a branding on their thumb. That was it.
They just got a tattoo or a branding on their thumb. But the good thing that came out of this is that the people remembered us. They remembered me by naming a school in Houston after me. And even Stevie Wonder, he sung a song that called me out in the song called Black Man.
And in that song, if you haven't heard it, Stevie goes through a list of accomplishments that most people are unaware of that were done by African Americans, and Crispus Attucks is one of the people mentioned in that song. That you lost your life that night, really the first shot of the American Revolution, the start of this country becoming a country, and on that road to freedom. Do you have any regrets about that night, about what happened?
I'm really surprised I get that question, because yes, there are regrets. I regret that I would not be able to grow old. I regret that I would not be able to have a family. And one of my biggest regrets is not being able to see what the colonies had become.
They've come a long way, that's for sure, and the struggle continues, and we'll talk about that in the next couple of seconds. But we want to thank you for your service and for your sacrifice that night during the Boston Massacre. Crispus Attucks, ladies and gentlemen.